2002. The euro becomes the official currency of 12 countries in the European Union. The Sanyo SCP-5300 becomes the first cell phone to feature a camera. Washington, D.C. is terrorized by a series of random sniper attacks. American Idol kicks off its dominant run. The Angels win their first World Series. The Red Wings win the Stanley Cup. The Lakers complete their three-peat. And Tom Brady won his first of 7 Super Bowl rings. A Beautiful Mind wins Best Picture. Alicia Keys wins Song of the Year with Fallen. Tobey Maguire becomes Spider-Man. And Michael Jackson really shouldn't be doing that. 2002 was also an innovative year for coasters. After the pinnacle of the coaster war a couple years earlier, manufacturers were still coming out with new technology and fresh ideas that came to a head in 2002. But the coaster war had a dark side, as some companies would not make it out alive. And these record-breaking thrill rides found themselves in the crosshairs of some very powerful people. These are the most important theme park stories of 2002. Before diving into the list, let's look at the best of the rest. And now for the top 10. January 14th, 2002. One of the 3 Vertigo towers at Cedar Point snapped, sending a steel beam of about 200 feet crashing to the ground. This was a brand new SNS Skysling that made its debut in August of 2001, operating for about 2 months before the park closed for the year. Engineers from SNS came rushing out to see how a brand new ride like this could just snap. They found that Cedar Point removed the ride vehicle for the off-season, and that was important to stabilize the towers from swaying more than the 8 feet they were supposed to. Knott's Berry Farm debuted their own version of this ride, also called Vertigo, in the fall of 2001. And after this incident, Cedar Fair decided to remove both of them. The chain felt like the incident would hurt the ride's popularity, so after just a few months of operation, the rides were scrapped. Six Flags Magic Mountain also received that model in 2001. Theirs called Thrill Shot, and they decided to keep theirs open, lasting almost a decade before being removed. Cedar Fair did seem to curtail its business with SNS after the incident, ordering 7 rides between 1996 and 2001, and only 2 since 2002. June 8th, 2001. A brand new Intamin Impulse coaster opens at Six Flags Marine World. Vertical Velocity was not an original model. In fact, just a month earlier, an identical coaster opened at Six Flags Great America. That one was advertised with 186-foot spikes and a top speed of 70 miles per hour. The Marine World version was also advertised with a top speed of 70 miles per hour, but with spikes just 150 feet tall. Because of local zoning laws, Marine World has a strict height limit. They could not build any rides over a height of, you guessed it, 150 feet. But the ride went up and operated for an entire year before they were busted. If it wasn't obvious enough that the spikes were a full 35 feet taller than permitted, the fact that other clones existed, listing the actual height, was impossible not to notice. Not wanting to scrap their brand new ride, the park and Intamin came up with a solution. Angle the front spike from 90 to 45 degrees, and cut off the illegal excess track on the back spike. They did not want to weaken the launch, so this radical and expensive alteration was their best path forward to appease the local government and keep the ride as extreme as it was before. What we ended up with in the summer of 2002 was a one-of-a-kind experience, separating itself from the rest of the Impulse clones, and stands as the only Impulse with an inversion. July 24th, 2002. Six Flags Great America announces that one of the park's original coasters, the Whizzer, would be removed after 26 seasons. This is a Schwarzkopf speed racer, built to thrill riders of all ages. August 11th was supposed to be its final day, but as soon as the public got word of the news, they were having none of it. The park was flooded with complaints over the next 2 weeks, demanding they spare the classic. August 8th, 2002. Just 3 days before its final day, the park announced that the Whizzer would be spared. However, they did need a plot of land for their new for 2003 coaster, And now that they were gonna leave the Whizzer alone, they turned their sights to Shockwave, the 14-year-old aero looper that claimed the title as the first 7-inversion coaster in the world. Was this whole thing a stunt by the park to drive up late summer attendance and reignite interest in the Whizzer? That may be true, but regardless, it's nice that the park listened to their clientele. Superman Ultimate Flight replaced Shockwave for the 2003 season, and Whizzer still stands today, surviving the chopping block 19 years ago, and will celebrate its 45th birthday in 2021. In 2001, Six Flags started playing with the idea of a virtual queue. They rolled out a low-queue ride reservation system at Six Flags Over Georgia, and were pleased with the results. For the 2002 season, they rolled it out to 9 more parks. They had seen what Disneyland did with their FastPass system over the past few years, after being introduced in 1999. But Six Flags saw the concept as a source of revenue. Guests would rent the QBot pager, and it would reserve a time for a certain ride. The QBot would buzz when it was time to ride, and there would be a special low-queue entrance for these guests. This was the beginning of what came to be the FlashPass system that the chain employs today, offering different tiers at different prices, from simply holding your spot in the normal queue line to skipping up to 90% of it. After 2002, the park never looked back from this controversial pay-for-access model, and just about every other major park has followed suit. The first modern coaster to feature an inversion came in 1975, Knott's Berry Farm's Corkscrew. The next year, Cedar Point's Corkscrew featured 3, then Carolina Cyclone with 4, Darien Lake's Viper with 5, Kings Island's Vortex with 6, and in 1988, the aforementioned Shockwave at Great America opened with 7. The need to break the inversion record died off a little, and 7 years later, DragonCon at Spain's Port Aventura opened with 8 inversions. This would hold the record through the end of the century, and the inversion record held steady even through the climax of the Coaster War. Was there a desire for a new record breaker that wasn't the tallest or the fastest? Intamin and Thorpe Park wanted to find out. March 22nd, 2002. Colossus opens up as the first coaster to hit the 10 inversion mark, reaching that mark with less than 3,000 feet of track. At the cost of £13.5 million, the ride would start with a vertical loop, head into a Cobra roll, 2 corkscrews, 4 Heartline rolls in a row, and end with another Heartline roll before the final breaks. This was the first of 6 installations of this 10 inversion model, all in Europe and Asia. This record would stand for more than a decade, before another park in the UK set the bar higher than just about anyone would ever want to go. July 18th, 2002. Custom Coasters International announces that it ceased operations, citing personal reasons. The company was founded in 1991 by Denise Din, the daughter of coaster designer Charles Din, as well as her brother Jeff and her husband Randy Larrick. Denise and Larry had divorced by the time the company got into financial trouble, which may have led them not to try to reorganize the company. Instead, she filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and liquidated the company's assets. They left behind 34 coasters around the world, including the New Mexico Rattler at Cliffs Amusement Park, which was under construction at the time that CCI went under. The park had to hire the construction crew to finish off the job. August 19th, 2002. Barely a month after CCI closed its doors, 4 of its engineers announced a brand new ride development and design firm, known as the Gravity Group, LLC. They would be located in Cincinnati, Ohio. In September, they launched their website and were open for business. It didn't take long for them to land their first contract, signing on with Holiday World in November to work on the Raven and the Legend, 2 of CCI's most popular coasters. It's no surprise that Holiday World and Mount Olympus gave the Gravity Group their first shot at building their own coaster a few years later, since both of them had so much experience with CCI. March 16th, 2002. Alton Towers opens up the project they touted as SW5, or Secret Weapon 5, the Aerial Inversion Ride, or AIR, a flying coaster. This was something that they had been dreaming up a dozen years earlier, wanting it to debut in 1998, but technology just hadn't gotten there. The park had a relationship with B&M going back to Nemesis, and then Oblivion, and they wanted this flying coaster to come from them. Around the time Oblivion opened to the public, B&M was in the early stages of making the flying coaster a reality. They saw the Vekoma Flying Dutchman debut in 2000, but had a totally different concept in mind. Rather than being put on your back, and interchanging between your back and your stomach, B&M wanted to start you off in the flying position, and leave you there for the majority of the ride. Vekoma's version only saw 3 installations over the course of 2000 to 2001, but Air was the first of 11 B&M flyers over the next 14 years. The B&M flying model has mechanical issues of its own, but no longer would parkgoers associate the flying model with the Vekoma Flying Dutchman or the Zamperla Volaire. B&M's flyer became the state-of-the-art, top-of-the-class option. Roller coasters have been evolving ever since the early 1970s, becoming taller, faster, and loopier, and really took off to a whole new level in the 1990s, when Intamin and B&M burst onto the scene. We were suddenly seeing coasters top 300 feet and 100 miles per hour, an amazing thrill for some, but concerning for others. Among those not amused by the coaster war was Ed Markey, a congressman from Massachusetts, stating, "Technology and commercial pressures are combining in ways that are testing the edge of the safety envelope on high-speed, high G-force attractions." His National Amusement Park Ride Safety Act dated back to 1999 and would give the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission jurisdiction to establish G-force limits nationwide. His campaign against extreme coasters caught the attention of the press in 2002, and theme park operators felt the need to quell these fears, or else their business could be in jeopardy. Bill Powers of IAAPA appeared on The Early Show with Ed Markey in June of 2002 to talk about the outstanding safety record of roller coasters. Six Flags commissioned the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, as well as the engineers from the Exponent Failure Analysis Associates, to investigate the issue. Their findings were in favor of the parks, citing no evidence of neurological injury, no public health risk, and no data suggesting that G-forces on coasters are a problem. The G-forces that these coasters pull are often sustained for a fraction of a second, and are not related to the height and speed of the ride. New Jersey lawmakers took out the issue themselves, and passed a law prohibiting coasters from pulling more than 5.6 Gs for more than 1 second. This did not affect any coasters in the state. Markey's bill for federal regulations was introduced 7 times between 1999 and 2011, but never received a vote. June 22nd, 2002. Accelerator opens up at Knott's Berry Farm. This was Cedar Fair's first coaster project with their new park, and wanted to make a splash. The problem is that they didn't have a lot of room to work with. The land that once hosted the wacky soapbox racers for 20 years, and then Windjammer surf racers for the next 3, was very compact. Cedar Fair looked to Intamin to build something with a launch that could fit here. This plot of land sat right next to Supreme Scream, the S&S drop tower, and the year prior, S&S took the compressed air technology used for these towers and flipped it on its side to build their first Thrust Air 2000 model, Hypersonic XLC at Paramount's King's Dominion. The acceleration from 0 to 80 miles per hour in 1.8 seconds is exactly what Knott's needed here, but they needed to do it without making as much noise. Knott's sits on a giant city block, with Accelerator right there on the corner, where all that noise would be disruptive to the outside world. They contacted Intamin for a solution, and they came up with the first ever hydraulic launch. In a nutshell, hydraulic fluid under pressure is used to drive a series of motors, and that spins a giant winch drum that's attached to a cable, that's attached to a catch car, that's attached to the train, which launches it. Accelerator was able to achieve 0 to 83 miles per hour in 2.3 seconds, launching up a 205-foot top hat, before winding through a couple overbank turns. This was an impressive feat for Intamin, and gave Knott's a thrill coaster they needed, without expanding the plot. The hydraulic launch technology has been replaced by magnetic launches over the last decade, but nobody can deny its impact. It was used 3 times over the next 8 years to break the world record for fastest coaster, the pinnacle being Formula Rossa at Ferrari World, maxing out at 149.1 miles per hour. January 12th, 2002. After a couple weeks of pass holder previews, X finally opens up to the public at Six Flags Magic Mountain. The Aerodynamics 4th Dimension prototype was supposed to debut the prior summer, but ran into a mess of problems. Aero poured money into fine-tuning the ride in the summer and fall of 2001, and fell into bankruptcy in December. They claimed to owe unsecured creditors more than $3.8 million, and to make the problems worse, Six Flags filed $5.8 million in claims against them because of all the problems with X. Even after its opening, the coaster was plagued with problems on a daily basis, experiencing a lot of downtime, being forced to run one train, which led to 4 and 5 hour wait times. And by May 2002, Six Flags wanted to bring on another company to fix it. They tried to acquire the design plans for X in exchange for $10,000 cash, and dropping their $5.8 million lawsuit. Aero rejected this deal, and Six Flags was stuck, so they shut down the ride in June, and wouldn't reopen it again until August. Some reports state that this episode soured Six Flags on ordering prototypes in the future, something that we did see play out prior to their bankruptcy in 2009, but they've since returned to seeking out first-of-their-kind attractions. October 29th, 2002. SNS purchased the assets of Aerodynamics for $1.9 million. This was officially the end of Aerodynamics, a company that was at the forefront of roller coaster innovation from the 1950s through the 1980s, but was struggling to keep up with this new competition over the previous decade. As for X, Magic Mountain now had their manufacturer to service the ride, and SNS would overhaul the coaster and give it new, lighter trains between 2007 and 2008, reopening as X2, saving the coaster and allowing it to continue on to this day. SNS would also take their newly acquired 4th Dimension coaster to Japan and China, where they opened up their own versions of the model, which are considered some of the best coasters in the world. That's a wrap on 2002. We said goodbye to Vertigo, Shockwave, 35 feet of vertical velocities track, Aerodynamics, and CCI, but welcomed the Gravity Group, the Hydraulic Launch, the B&M Flyer, the 10 inversion coaster, and low Q technology. We can also thank advocates from the theme park industry for pushing back on the possibility of federal G-force limits, an effort in 2002 that continues to pay off to this day. Let me know what you think about my list. If I left anything off here, be sure to put it in the comments below, and let me know what you think was the most important development from 2002. Before you leave, be sure to drop a like. It really helps out the channel, and these videos take a lot of effort to make. And be sure to subscribe, and look at the other episodes that I've done in this series. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.